Screen.
Okay. Good evening, everybody. This is Stephen Zarinsky, President of the Society of Australasian Specialists. And tonight we have Richard Moss, who hails from Great Britain. He's going to be talking about New Hebrides, two things, the departmentals, pre-independence, and then a post-independence issue of an overprint. And and so now I am going to give it over to him so he can start the presentation. And the next presentation we have in about a month's time, just so everybody knows, is on British New Guinea and fakes and forgeries. And contact me if you want to, if you don't already have my email address. Okay. Um, so now I'm going to share. If I can figure out how to do this. Okay.
Are we okay?
Yep. Good. Start.
Well, um, now I've got two presentations this evening. The first one is on the Free Frank Mail of the New Hebrides from 1909 to 1980, and I'm concentrating on the British administration caches. Now, I don't know what you all know about the New Hebrides, but they were a condominium. It was run jointly by the British and the French. But when we say it's run jointly, it wasn't really totally run jointly. There was a joint department, but it was really jointly and separately. And what you find is that for every British administration cachet, there's
Okay.
usually a similar one for the French. And uh, if there's any sort of if the two combine together on any particular subject, you can even find three on the three caches covering the same department. So that makes it quite a lot of fun. It also means that for everything you find, everything that exists, you could end up with an awful lot of caches. So here's an example right at the beginning of what we're looking at, which is a British cache on Her Majesty's service, and it's the Education Office. So if we move on to here, um, a quick resume here. I won't go into all I won't go into all the wording. It'll just take too long to do that, but I'll let you have a read at that. As I say, there were up to 1960. There were a few free franking very few free frank caches, but after 1960, the whole thing expanded, and you get loads and loads of departments, dozens of them in actual fact, with their own caches. There was a book produced in 2000 by Bill Holland, and it was published by PISC in 2000. And he gave them all numbers, and he did everything in alphabetical order. Um, so when I've found a new cache, I've given it an A number, and to put it in the uh, roughly the correct place without everybody having to change their notations in their albums, and they've also numbered them in red. So anything you see with a red numbering is a new cache. Quick resume of the numbers, and as you can see, let's concentrate on the British. Let's forget all the rest for the moment. But on the British caches, there were 64 recorded in the year 2000 from 1960 and six up to 1960. So you can see there weren't very many caches up to 1960. But since then, we've added another five to the pre-1960s, another six to the post-1960s. And of that lot, not all of them have been found genuinely used, because some of them are caches that people have found in departmental offices, and there's no postal evidence. They may have been used postally, but there's no evidence of them being postally used. There might be the odd one that's been used by a collector, but you can usually work those out, the ones that they found lying around and the go, so to speak. And so, as you can see, of that lot, there's 60 genuinely used from 1960, and in this collection, there's 45 of them. So it gives you a rough idea what you're looking at. It's quite complicated, and there we go. Original research, Bill Holland wrote the book in 2000, which I've already told you about, and various nationals working in the New Hebrides manage to save material in their offices. They realize being collectors or having an interest in stamps, they save some of the material, and the most credit should go to Barry Scott of New Zealand and to the late Jim Crompton, who in that Barry was the one who saved all the stuff, and Jim was the one who actually accumulated a huge amount of stuff, which is basically the basis of my collection.
You need to have a tremendous amount of material to get a sense of, well, to check for varieties because there's no book on any of this. You're writing the
Oh,
book, so if the there could be three or four different caches
yes. Well,
for for one use
the
for
book
one.
was written in 2000. There was a book written in 2000,
Hmm. Oh,
which is
true. Okay,
actually available on the PISC website.
but until
Now
that
the
point,
Brit
that you didn't know.
yes.
Yeah.
Well, here we are. Now we this is a picture of the British Residency as it was in Port Villa. Um, what I've got here is what was on the front of a Christmas card, and that's what it looked like. I believe this particular island is now a holiday, has been turned into a holiday island. Mm. Now this is where we start with the caches. Now the condominium cache is known back as far as 1909, but the earliest one recorded of the British cache is this one, which is dated the 12th of May 2011. It's not a brilliant cache, as you can see. The centre part with the coat of arms doesn't show very well, and it was posted to Sydney, and it's got a Sydney transit mark on the back. Whereas that's not a very good cache. This is a much better one, and this is dated June 11. And another nice one, addressed to the same people in Sydney. And this particular cache is not recorded in the PISC book. It is recorded in the Howells Collis book, which was published on the New Hebrides, which was published by the Collectors Club of Chicago in the 1960s. But it was missed out in the Pacific Islands one, and so you've got the one at the top, which is slightly different, as you can see, to the one shown in the Pacific Islands book. So whereas the Pacific Islands say that this one at the bottom is number 5, I've called this 5A. Although this is earlier, it's got to be called 5A, otherwise we mess everybody's notations up. Now I'm stuck here. That's better. I think I've gone back too far. There we are. And here we get the type 5 cache, the one which is in the in the New Hebrides book. But I put these together as the same cache for several years. I put them I put them down as being both of the same cache. But I had another look at it and thought, well, one's just worn, the other one is has gone on in a different manner. Except, of course, the one which is worn is a little bit earlier than the one which is not worn, and that sort of situation comes up later on. So I had a really good look at this one, and again, we've now got a Type 5B, because when you look at the one in 1931. I've put down 4 characteristics there of the 1931 and 4 totally different characteristics of the 1935 cache. So whereas there was one recorded previously, there are now 3. And this is where, if you're lucky enough to see several items, you can spot these. Whereas if you just see one, you say, "Ah, I've got it." OB6, they changed the separator, whereas the previous separator was a hyphen. It's now a star. So that's OB6. OB6, a nice item here, misdirected. It was sent to a flag making company in Liverpool, but they forgot to put the country on, so it was sent to Liverpool instead of being sent to Liverpool, UK. It was sent to Liverpool, New South Wales. So you've got a back stamp for Liverpool, New South Wales on the back. It's returned to the New Hebrides, which is the unusual thing about this. It wasn't sent on to Liverpool, UK. It was sent back to New Hebrides, and you'll see that originally it left New Hebrides on the 17th of September. It was the 30th of September in Australia, but it was back in the New Hebrides on the 20th and not dispatched till the 28th of October. So it's just a little bit of fun, but a very nice, interesting cover. And enclosed is a letter thanking the what we get, acknowledging receipt of the flags. And just as a rider to this, Porter Brothers, who were the people to whom this cover was sent, they provided the flag for the funeral of Winston Churchill and for Princess Diana. Another one which is unrecorded, Type 2A, and this is for His Majesty, his Britannic. I put HM Britannic. His Britannic, yes, His Majesty's Britannic. His HM. Why have I put HM? Can't understand that. His Majesty's, yes, His Majesty's High Commissioner for the Court of the Western Pacific. So I've given that one two A. I was lucky enough to buy a collection which had got a lot of stuff that we'd never seen before. So this is where this one came from. Another one to Porter Brothers, again with a receipt. But now we've got Type OB4, which is a circular cachet for the British residency, for the British Commissioner. And
There are Solomon Island caches that look exact so close to this
yes, that's right.
for
Yes,
Her Majesty, His Majesty's resident commissioner, and all the different provinces.
yes, yes,
Looks just like that.
yes, yes. But what is interesting about that one, and that'll come up shortly, is that whereas that was the only one recorded, a closer look tells you that that is not going to be the case. But I've got another copy of OB4 with an interesting remarking. Now, if any of you collect New Hebrides, you might know that there was a cache used during the time of the Pacific War, where any mail sent to Geneva for the Red Cross had this cachet that's shown on the back, but it had it obviously in red because it was the Red Cross. This one, in actual fact, this particular item here, this predates the Pacific War because the Pacific War started in December 41, but this predates it by 3 or 4 months. So originally this was not a Red Cross cachet, but to date I have no idea what this was originally produced for. But it's just interesting that it's that by buying a cachet has produced an early use of some and a different use of something which was used later on. And that's one of the items used later on. Although that one cachet is slightly different, that one is the French version. You can actually find that particular material of that particular type with the English cachet as well. And that's the only one I've got of the Red Cross cachets. But there are other ones shown on Roland Klinger's website, which show the one that I've got. And here's an interesting item. There was another one. This has got several interesting things about it. First of all, the envelope, it's a provisional envelope because that on His Majesty's service has been stamped on it as opposed to printed on it. It's posted to the Emergency Solomon Islands government in Sydney, Australia, because of course the Solomon Islands at that stage were occupied by Japan. And thirdly, um, I had a good look at that strike. I thought, well, this is the same as the old one. Everything looked exactly the same. The only thing which was slightly different was that some of the gaps looked look just a little bit different. But of course, you've got to remember that some of these cancellations were rubber and they did spread a little bit. So you've got to be very, very careful when you're looking at gaps. But a closer look, um, I took a closer look at the star and between Commissioner and New Hebrides. And you'll find that on the original one, the points of the star are pointing in different directions. So it clearly is as different cachet. So again, if you look at these things hard enough, you find some very unusual items. And this is not a very good cachet on here. You can hardly see it in actual fact, but it's quite important because if they were posting on his stuff which was official, locally, there was no charge. But at that time, if you wanted it to go by airmail, you had to pay the airmail surcharge between the two countries. Because the rate to New Zealand was for normal mail was higher than this, but the airmail surcharge was £1.20, and that's what you've got on here. And I don't think there's another. Some of you might have one in your collection, but there's only what this is the only one that's publicly recorded on Roland's website. Very unusual item here. Now, I've never seen anything like this ever, and except in New Hebrides. Um, if if a if a governor in any British territory posted anything by registered mail, it always had a local registration mark on it. And it would have the name of the town. It would have Suva for Fiji. It would have in post-war period, it would have Honiara for the Solomon Islands, and but this one, it's got His Britannic Majesty's Resident Commissioner written on in ink, and a blank registration label underneath with 558 written in it. And I've never seen anything like it before. But I was going to put an article in the Pacifica about this, and I thought, oh, this is something new. But I use the Pacifica's um, I use the searchable PDF function in Pacifica, and I just casually typed all those letters in, and blow me, I found that one had been reported in 2011, but in it typed, and the one at the bottom is the one which is in Pacifica in 2011, and mine is recorded in Pacifica about 3 years ago. But it's just unusual, and I'm wondering if anybody's ever seen anything like that registered in any other British colony. And it just seems very surprising that New Hebrides did it and nowhere else. And the other interesting part is that these two are one is post-war and one is pre-war, because this one is posted in 1946. That one was 1938. And that's the back with a nice seal on it and a transit mark in Sydney. Can't see the transit mark very well, and you can't really see the seal very well. And because of its color and the background, it doesn't scan very well. But you can see you can see quite a lot of HBM resident commissioner in that seal. And I'm doing my best to preserve that seal. And again, I think it's quite a nice little item. I've not seen one of those before.
I do
Not
feel that there is something similar that I've seen with the registration label and having that HB HBM RC. I just have to can't put my finger on it.
Yes, yes. Well, that actually was in Pacifica, but it didn't come up very well. Printed, it doesn't come up very well at all. Now, I'm not going to go into all these caches for this particular type, but after 1960, there are quite a lot of caches used by the British Residency, and that's for example of four of them. But I'm not going to go into all the detail, but there's four different types there, one of which is was unlisted. Now we'll go after for the post 1960 period, and this is a typical example of what you find. The local hospital, well, they're still allowed to have free mail, so they have but they've got to put their own cachet on the envelope, and normally it has to have something on the envelope to say it's official business as well, and to go for free mail. And there's an example of one with a Tanner cancellation on it, and it's for the local hospital. And um, there were 42 departments had their own council. Although there were 60, I think 60 councils, there were 42 different departments. So that means that 18 had more than one cachet. Um, a couple more here, and strike some other departments more complex. Here we have the education department, and one is for the South District, which is Tanner, and the other one is for the Central District number one, which is I think is Port Villa. There are two central districts, the Northern District and the Southern District in the New Hebrides. And so you've got cachets probably for CD2 and the Northern District, similar to this one. Um, and there's some more education department ones. Here's the CD2 and another CD2 council at Norfolk. And the interesting part about this one is that although this where this item was posted on the island of Malekula, and in 1974 there wasn't a post office on Malekula. Everything was cancelled in Port Villa. But by 1976, a post office had been opened at Dorset. So here you've got the same cachet, but two different postmarks on it, which in actual fact show you what the business was at the time. Three different cachets for the police commandants, and if I'd shown this a couple of days ago, I'd have made a mistake on this little lot. But by going through these with Steve the other day, I realised one of them was wrong. So you've got the British Commandant with two different types of cachet here, type two, type three. When I say about type B, I mean type B2 because B1 was something completely different. B2, B3, one's got a very flat top, and the other one a flat top and base. The other one's very much a squashed up variety of it. And then thirdly, this is the right one this time, Steve. And that is that is the fourth one, which has got a rounded insignia and larger letters. Two recorded There were two recorded caches for the Northern District. And when I say recorded, I mean there were two recorded. But one, as you can see, is quite blurred, but it's much bigger than the other one, and there's no question that it's a different cache. The same department, two different caches, and one's getting quite worn by 1974. The other one looks very much neater. And but I had a problem with these because in the collection I bought, which was originally owned by Jim Crompton, there were several copies of this cachet in his accumulation, and I was always puzzled by the fact that the earlier ones look blurred, and the later ones look very clear. Now that didn't make a lot of sense. But when you look at those two caches there, you can't see an awful lot of different with them. They're the same size. Um, and everything looks pretty well the same. The gaps look slightly different, but you can't really prove that it's a different cache. And but you can because when I looked a little bit, I tried all the measurements, all the positions, everything seemed exactly the same. But when I put a ruler across the line district agents, on B11, the top of district agents was lined up with the H&I of New Hebrides, and on the other one, which was the later one, it's lined up with the bottom of it. So that proves that there was two different caches. But it only goes to show I've found quite a few of these. If you're lucky enough to find 4 or 5 copies of some of these things in any country, it's always worth having a look to see if they are really all the same, because there might be just that little something that shows the map as different.
It's because in some ways, if the study group is only maybe 10 or 12 items big to begin with, and suddenly you have 4 or 5 new ones to look, to look at B11, suddenly you could have all
Yeah.
kinds of different things going on there. You just don't know.
Oh yes. Oh yes. Yes. Well, that was definitely a replacement cache. That was why it looked clearer. It wasn't the original cache. It was a new cache. And that B11A is unusually found in many different colors. Normally, you don't. There's a little bit of variation, but not the way it is on this one. And so there's a purple one there. There's a green. There's a green one. And there's a red one. But this red one's slightly different because it's got the British. First of all, it's later. It's 1980, and it's got the British wiped out. Now they had self-government in 1979, and so obviously somebody's decided that they would take out the British and just say it's just a New Hebrides cache. But it's not in this particular case. It's not quite as simple as that because this is the district agent for the Northern District Agent. In new style caches, you can find Central District number 2, you can find Central District number 1, and you can find the Southern District in that particular style, but you can't find the Northern one. And I'm going to suggest that there was a Northern one that got lost. And the other possible suggestion is that there wasn't one ordered at all, in which case that is the reason why that one was actually blotted out. For one of those two reasons, either they didn't order one or they lost it. So again, now that definitely makes that a collectible item because it completes a set of 4. And I think from memory, uh, that one, no, I didn't show the others. That one is actually quite a late use. That one unusually is um, after independence, but it was there during the British and French period. British residency ran a messenger service, and that is an example used on by the messenger service to the condominium treasurer with the embassy cachet on it. Mail was received from London in a diplomatic bag, and there's an example of it. It was put in the bag in London on the 5th of May, or it was handled on the 5th of May, went out to the New Hebrides, and where it was received 21 days later. It might well be it didn't take 21 days to get there, and 5th of May might be the day it was actually they received the original document. I'll never prove that, but the cancellation on the top shows that once it got to the New Hebrides, the people in the New Hebrides for the embassy forwarded it to the person at the Land Registry Department. So a nice bit of diplomatic bag stuff as well. Philatelists got up to some naughty tricks, as we all know, and we all try to manipulate things if we can. And this philatelist got hold of a cachet in an office when he was in the New Hebrides, and he um, uh, put this on an envelope and addressed it to himself, so that we don't identify who it was. I have digitally removed the name on the envelope. And so that's a cachet which it's in the book. But when Bill Holland handled all these, he refused to mark down as genuinely used anything like that. So whereas he marked in his book those which have been genuinely used, that one is not marked as genuinely used. But they're useful as a reference, as long as you mark them up. In fact, in my collection, instead of putting them on cream paper, put them all on white paper with the word philatelic item on the top of the page in blue, so that people know what they're looking at. But that one turned out to be quite useful in the end because I found this one. I think I found this one on hip stamps of all places, and it was the same cachet. But if you look at this one, that's posted in Port Villa. That one's posted in Santo. Now they might be the same cachet, but the odds are that when they produce these cachets, the two were slightly different. Because if you've got a cachet that's in use in Villa, they can't just take it to put to Santo, which is over 100 miles away. And sure enough, they are two different caches, and I use the same technique that I used on the B11, and you'll find that you can see by the alignment that they are two different caches, and also when you look a little bit closer, you can see that the letters on the Villa one are very much smaller than the ones on the central letters are much smaller. I think that might be the end of the first part. I'm not quite sure about this. Yes, it is. Now, I don't know whether anybody wants to ask any questions at this stage. Steve?
No, I'm waiting. Thought I
Any
thought other
questions,
people.
anybody?
Well, I'll just start with one question. Not much more like a comment. You really need a large amount of this material to really get a sense of top from
You do. You
a
do.
sense
You've
of
got to pick it.
rarity and each one has got to be analyzed because even though there is a now you corrected me, even though there is a book on it, you know,
Yes,
there can be more than one printing of these things, and
yes. Well,
it makes it interesting.
If Barry Scott and a couple of others hadn't accumulated all this stuff, but saved all this stuff, and if Bill Holland and Jim Compton and other people as well, because they weren't alone in collecting this sort of material, if they hadn't kept them all, then I wouldn't be able to do this, and neither would other collectors. But
And
it just goes to show if you can get a large amount of stuff or accumulate stuff over a period of time, or even see a lot which has got five or six things which look exactly the same, it's not necessarily so. And I
right,
think that applies to any marks from any country.
and the interesting thing is, it's not as if they sat around and cornered the market on this. I mean, these envelopes are doing government business. There's a lot of them out there. A lot of them were a lot of different departments had reasons to send mail out and about, and it's just we were able that we got lucky that there were enough people out there at the time. This is going on to
Yes,
not throw the stuff in the wastebasket
yes. Well, I
and to
believe
put
that,
not to bin it, but to put it to separate it.
yeah. Well, I believe that Mrs. Scott, in actual fact, worked in the Justice Department, and an awful lot of stuff is addressed to the Justice Department. And a lot of that was down to her, but all the arrangements were made with other people to do the same sort of thing. It
Right.
wasn't just that department. They had contacts in other departments who were keeping stuff and accumulating it all. And
But
I think
yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
from memory, I think Barry was probably now somebody might be able to correct me on this one because I'm not sure about this. I suspect Barry was the one who actually put the whole lot together and made certain that that it was all it didn't just get dispersed all over the place, but there was some sort of order kept to it.
Right.
Now
But
that's the end of that half. But
yeah, but
if I s- s- stop the share on that for a minute and I go back in again, do you want me to go back in again now?
oh, you can do. I just was going to keep commenting that uh, that while it's rare to get this stuff, the governments did a lot of this stuff. All of these OHMS envelopes got a lot of use. The departments were busy using it. It's not it it wasn't a far-fetched thing to do at all. It was a part of normal business.
Mm,
And the fact that it's not collected or not heavily collected, maybe due to the scarcity of it or nobody's that interested, but it was part of running the government, just like using stamps
Yes,
as it is just as valid.
yes,
That's my point. That's all.
yes. Well, the way I got into this in 19 as it's just five of us here, the way I got into this in 1980, I heard all about this from Jim Crompton that these existed, and he gave me two or three examples, and I thought, well, I've only got three or four here. There's not much I can do with this, and I just left it alone for years. And Bill Holland's stuff came up for sale, and I bought that through the Pacific Island Study Circle auction. I bought quite a bit of that, and I put quite a bit together, but it wasn't an awful lot really. It was a bit here and a bit there. It wasn't until Jim Crompton's stuff came up that I was able to really do something with it, and he had masses of the stuff. And he had made some effort to he marked everything. He put them all in on album leaves. He'd marked them up as to what he thought they were in terms of numbers. But what he hadn't done was he hadn't put them in order. So the first thing I did was I got all this stuff out and I got a week's holiday at the time, and we weren't doing very much. We went down to a sort of a lodge place, and we weren't doing an awful lot. So I had these all over the floor at the lodge, getting them all into order. And it wasn't until I got them into order that I realised that whereas they thought there were sort of 60 caches, there were actually 66. Because once you see four or five together, you can see that something might be different.
Right. Exactly
But
my point. Yes. You need to, you
yeah,
can't,
yeah,
you have to look at them together, not one here
yes,
and one
yeah.
someplace else. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, but that applies
Everything.
to anything in collecting. You could be collecting postmarks from a particular country, and you get a huge box full. We've all seen it. You get a huge box full of stuff, and it becomes overwhelming. But if you get them all sorted out in some way, and then look at the ones you've sorted out, you can see where the changes are.
Right. Exactly. And that's what makes collecting. So
Yeah, yeah, and that I think when to me, I get a lot of fun out of doing that.
I
I
agree.
think it's probably constructive as well. So there we go.
All right, then.
Yeah. You want me to? I'll carry on now.
I think so. Yeah. If anybody else has got something to say, they'll speak up.
Anyway, 1977 provisional set of New Hebrides. They changed their currency to the gold franc in 1977, and they were going to get a new definitive set, but the printers weren't on time. They didn't get anything on time, so printing wasn't done. Probably the designs weren't done on time. And so they decided they'd have to overprint the 1972 issue. And so they got onto the printers in Paris and said, "Have you got any left from 1972?" They said, "Yes, we've got quite a lot left. We'll overprint them for you." But then the problem started. They've been there for 5 years with a very sticky gum. And when they tried to put them through the machines, there was a lot of a huge amount of stuff was badly damaged, and they didn't get out anywhere near as many stamps as they were hoping to overprint as many stamps as they were hoping to. And I'm told that in some cases where they tried to um, put batches into the machine, that in 98%, even up to 98% of them were spoiled and had to be thrown away.
Wow.
So so eventually they had to overprint them locally as well. And later on, they had some that they reprinted them, and you get on one or two of them, you get differences in the reprints. And what I've shown here are effectively three different types. You've got the Paris overprints with small letters. You've got the first overprints locally with larger letters, and you've got the second overprints, which have got slightly wider. The spaces on the 35. There's a difference in the spacing between the top line and the bottom line, and all those three are in the Standard Gibbons catalogue. On the 35, there are also six different varieties, seven major listed varieties, and this is one of them here. On the 35, you can get the 35 with the F missing, because when they printed them, The last few sheets they overprinted, the F fell out when they did them locally, so you can get NH instead of FNH. And it
No,
was only
nobody
missing one.
noticed.
There's the missing F here. There's a pair with the FNH and NH, which showing it was a row 4 stamp 2. Now, are you going to move on screen? Yes, there we are. And there are two local settings of the 15 FNH, which was printed in a slightly different way. You've got your French one here with quite a thick bar, and then you've got this the local one had a very thin bar on it. And the postmaster, when he saw this, he didn't like it. In fact, I think there's one missing here. No, that's right, that's right. Um, the postmaster didn't like it, and he said, "When you reprint them, I want it with a much more solid bar, so it looks like the French ones." But when they did reprint it, the FNH was slightly bigger, but more importantly, the bar is only about 3/4 the length. In fact, on the original one, you can see it starts immediately under the 5 and goes way beyond the 1. On this one, it starts at the end. It starts at the beginning of the 1 and ends at the end of the 5. So you've got 3 different types, and you've also got a raised bar variety on row 5, on row 1, stamp 5, on the 15, on the first printing. And I think I put arrows to show you that one's got the bar at the bottom of gold, and that one is at the top of gold. It's the only one that's in that position. Considering these were done in type, and they got no computers. They actually did quite a good job of this overprint, and whereas a lot of the modern day ones, they don't seem to worry too much if they make any mistakes, and if they do make mistakes, they don't correct them properly. But this one, they did make an effort that when they made a mistake, they got it corrected, or if there was a mistake there, as you've got in this case, that they got them removed. And there are some other locally overprinted items which have got errors. You've got the double overprint on the FNH, which you can see. You can see FNH there, and you can see the H in the margin on the double one. Um, the 15, I've not shown this as a complete stamp because I've not got it in my collection. I don't feel entitled to put the whole stamp there. But that's the picture from the stamp, and as you can see, it's got an inverted overprint on that 15. On the second setting, it's got an inverted overprint. I haven't got that one. It's the one I haven't got. But they're also but when they were originally printed locally, they had this local stamp committee, and a few days before they were going to issue them, they showed the stamps to the stamp committee. And when they when one of the members of the stamp committee happened to be a collector, but he kept quiet about it. This is the story. He kept quiet about it. And on the day they were issued, he was first in the queue, and the postmaster got rather suspicious when they found him taking stamps out of the same position of the sheet. And as you can see on the bottom row, the first stamp has FHN instead of FNH on it. And the
Oh,
postmaster
that's so
very
funny.
quickly found out what was going on, removed all the 30s and 35s off the counter, tore out all the stamps with with the error, and anything that was bought afterwards was bought without the error. That was rather naughty.
That guy was smart because no good deed goes
Yeah,
unpunished. For example, I
yeah.
remember
It was
once
on.
there's a little island in the Cook Islands, Atitaki, had something called a little place there called 1 Foot Island, and then I got some envelopes in that that said 1 Foot Island, Cook Islands, and then I emailed the postmaster and I said, it's really not the Cook Islands, it's Atitaki. She goes, oh, you're right. And then next thing I know, it all got corrected and said 1 Foot Island, Atitaki. So foolish me
Yes.
for bringing it to anyone's attention.
Yes.
Anyway,
Well, the
sorry.
old currency stamp, yeah. I was fortunate enough to be able to buy quite a bit of um at, at the time. In fact, I managed to buy this in 1970, end of 1977. I bought an accumulation from the islands
Hmm.
of mail posted in the previous 6 months. And there were quite a lot of interesting items in it. And here's a couple straight away. The old currency stamps were the new currency stamps came in on the 1st of July 1977, but initially the old ones were going to be valid for 1 month. And there's a couple here of covers here posted in July 1977 using the using the old stamps. Now, the correct rate conversion rate of the from the original rate, which I can't see at the moment because of the way my screen's working. Um, the uh, uh, the conversion rate was 29 FNH. So you've got one cover here with 25 on it, which they let go through, and the other one, which is well over franked at 50. But a couple of early rate covers, couple of early covers commercially used to the Anglican Church in Lolloway, Longana. And here's another one, and this one's quite interesting. And combination covers are are not common at all. In fact, I don't know of another one that's commercially used that I've seen. Uh, some of you might have one, but I've not seen another one. And this has got the 5 FNH and the 20 old francs on it, both all but used in July 77, and the correct rate was 10 FNH. A 20 was valued on the conversion rate was 5.8. So you got a 5.8 and a 5. So this was fully covered for the 10 cent for the 10 FNH local rate. And quite a nice cover. And I'm very pleased to have that one. Loads and loads of opportunities of on these by studying these covers. And here's a large registered envelope addressed from the bank. And this has got 7 copies of the local 10. And I didn't spot this, but after I'd done my bit, which I thought was good to have actually recorded it, I sent this to Roland Klinger, and you probably those of you who collect New Hebrides will know about Roland Klinger's website, where he records a load of stuff. And Roland commented that the cancellation for Villa was used on the register was the one that which had been taken out of the service 5 years previously. And they were obviously using the one which was previously used for cancelling general mail. They were using it on the counter, and nobody had spotted that until this stage. And I certainly didn't spot it at the time. But what I've shown here is there's an example of the 1959 council, and that's the 1970. That's one which was normally in use in 1977, and they're very, very different. But they're quite nice. And the other item on there is that it's got a complete strip of 5 top to bottom of the sheets. And when I looked at this, it was the one person had done a study on these and worked out all the different gaps between the FNH between the bars on these stamps, because when they printed them locally on the first printing they weren't the bars weren't quite the same gap, but all these were 3.5 millimeters, which proves that that is actually from column 3. All the records showed that, in fact, it was in writing that the earliest recorded use was on the 12th of August for the local overprints. And at the time, in 1977, when I got all this lot, I was very disappointed because I hadn't got anything that was dated July, and I knew they'd been overprinted in July, so I really took no notice of the local of the dates on the cancellations. I was just disappointed I hadn't got any early ones and couldn't really understand why. And it wasn't until I took after 15 years of taking no notice of New Hebrides whatsoever, when I came back into it, that I looked at the records and found that I got one dated the 11th of August, and it was down as the 12th of August, the earliest day. So I wrote to a couple of people and said, I've got one here dated the 11th. They said, no, no, if it was originally recorded as the 12th, that must be right. The postmasters did make mistakes. And I carried on a bit longer. And I thought, well, I've got one dated the 10th. I've got one dated the 9th. And then I came across this one dated the 8th. And not only is it dated the 8th, but it's got a transit mark dated the 9th. So that definitely wasn't a postmarking error. So that at the moment, that is the earliest recorded date for use of the New Hebrides local overprints. The other surprise is that it was used in Norsop in a sub office, and I'm sure they must have been issued in Santo earlier than that, but nobody has. If they've seen one, it's not been recorded. There were four local printings. The all but the third had a 3.5 to 3.65 millimeter gap between the bars. And the one I'm shown here is 3.5 millimeters, but using a scale, using a precision scale, and using a 15 times magnifier, I've blown them up so you can see the difference in the size on the scale between these two. And one is clearly coming up very different to the other one because that's well short compared with that one. And the third printing had a larger gap, and they had a gap of 3.75 to 4. These will never be catalogued because the gap, certainly Stanley Gibbons, anything that's less than 2.25 of a millimeter, a certain probably half a millimeter, they won't. They won't put them in their catalogue because the gap's too small. But these were 3.75 to 4, and there's an example of a 3.75 one. 5 FNH was the local rate for unsealed for printed papers and unsealed covers. And there is a Paris printed stamp and a local printed stamp on local covers. Both these are unsealed covers, so they are genuinely used. Even the one, the window envelope, they're genuinely used, and they are not easy to find. To find those. And here's another. Here's a 15 used in combination with a 5, and that one's got a Paris. It's got the Paris overprint on it. So I've just blown that one up to show the smaller letters of the Paris overprint. This is local printing, and you get the large letters and the small letters. Large letters for the local printing, the small letters for the Paris printing. So this is the 15 first local printing with the thin bar, which is this one here. When I can get my cursor going here, there, and I've blown it up so you can see the difference between the two.
This is only done on the, this is only in French, on the French stamps. How about the English stamps? No problem?
Well, it's exactly the same, on the English stamps. And you've got another you've got one used on an aerogram here.
Oh,
The
nice.
it had to be the aerogram had to be paid in full. The stamp on this one is not high quality, but this is in fact it's got a corner off as you can see. But it is an example of the 15 being used for the full payment on an aerogram. Because at the state when this aerogram was posted, the old 35 one had been demonetized. And that was a family communication, not a collector's item. Because I think we found on an earlier one here, you'll find the same name came up. Well, it does come up later anyway. Same name comes up again. Um, 20 FNH correct airmail use. Prior to the currencies being changed, there was a different rate to the Solomon Islands for rare mail as there was to Australia. But after they changed to the FNH currency, the Solomon Islands and Australia were both 20 were both 20 FNH. And here we get an unusual usage. Um, a lot of companies sent out monthly magazines, and this particular one here, they posted them in bulk from Australia to the New Hebrides, and then I had them locally franked to save postage. And there's a roller council using the correct internal rate for printed papers. Another use of the 20, but this time it's incorrect. And there's a reason for this. These were posted from a bookshop, and for some reason they've sent out stuff which was should have had five on it because both these are unsealed envelopes. They should have had a five on, not a 20. So why would they put on four times as much? And won't be able to prove this, but I'm pretty confident about this, and I think you'll probably agree with me, that if I tell you that the rate pre-decimalization, when it was gold francs, not pre-decimalization, when it was gold francs and not FNH, the rate was 20, and they used this orange bird stamp. Somebody in the bookshop got hold of the new stamps and said, we use the orange stamp, we'll put those on the envelopes. So they ended up paying four
I'm
times more
certain
than they
that's
should
it.
have done.
Yes,
So
for
it's
sure.
just another little story, and I thought it was worth putting these in because it's just one of those little things you can put in your collection that's different. And here we get two 20 FNHs used to make up the airmail rate to Britain. Um, One little story will come up about this. Bishop Rawcliffe married a lady from after 1977, married a lady from Leon Solent, so you can guess where he was at the time. He'd gone to visit her. And here you get another one from the 25 sent to the Solomon Islands. But the 25 was still a rate if it weighed between 10 and 20 grams. So this is a higher rate postage to him in the Solomon Islands. 230s on the cover. I'm just going through the rates at this stage so you can see them all commercially used, or those that I've got. And 235s here, Paris ones on another nice envelope. And those are the local overprints of the 35, because if you look, you'll see the totally different types on the 35 and a 15. But the 15 also has what they call the broken end variety. Now, I've got a sheet of the 15s from the first printing, and the stamps are in a different the broken end is in a different position on the first overprint to where it was on the second overprint. So obviously they were using the same characters, but redid redid the plate completely. And when I say broken N, you can see the N, the second stroke of the N is much shorter than the H, the stroke on the H. Just a little variety. And the 40 used to Paris in 1970, again used in that's quite early used in July 1977. And virtually all the covers I've shown you arrived in this package, and which was posted on the 27th of November 1977. And it's, as you can see, it's got a 500 local, a 35 local. It's got an AO mark, which is ultra objet, which means it's second class airmail. And I'm rather proud of that. It was in pretty scruffy condition. But if somebody posts you an envelope with 100 covers in it, it's not going to survive the post without a little bit of damage. But fortunately, what was inside it was not damaged. And now, where did all these come from? Virtually everything you've seen has come from the Anglican mission on the island of Aoba. Now, and Aoba itself, there's a picture of the mission on the card. Aoba was the name of the island, which is now called, since independence, they call it Ambai. But it's got a bit of a history before that. And one of the names of the island was Omba, one of the old names. And somebody had actually written one of the covers I got. It was actually addressed to Omba and not to Aoba. And if you look at the postcard, it's got Opa on it instead of Aoba. So you've got Oba, Opa, and Omba as old names, and you've got Ambai as a new name. So it's just another interesting part on there. And what I haven't covered, and I haven't done a slide for it, um, the all these covers were sent to me by I think it goes back to 1972. I went to a meeting of the German. It was a German Philatelic Society, and they were having a meeting in Norwich, and there was a dealer there who got a load of covers addressed to Arch, Archdeacon Rawcliffe, and I thought, well, I bought some of those covers. And when I couldn't get hold of any covers, in desperation, I wrote a letter to Archdeacon Rawcliffe asking in the hope that I might get 3 or 4 covers. And in actual fact, by the time I was writing in 1977, he was now Bishop Rawcliffe, and he was the one who sent me all these covers. And that's his writing on there. And the other interesting part is that in the end of November 1977, there was there was a very serious situation was developing in Port Villa. There were riots all over the place, and there was a serious possibility there was going to be a coup. And he was one of the people who was involved in in calming everybody down. But in the middle of all that, he still managed to find time to post all these covers off to a collector. And when you think of it, considering the turmoil of the time, he could well have said, "Oh, well, these covers might just never have been sent off." And I'm very grateful, but always been grateful for the fact that he sent those to me, particularly in those circumstances. So there we are. I think that's the end of the presentation. I'll stop sharing.
Amazing. It makes it look very common.
Yeah.
You know, it's interesting when you and I were talking the other day, you you didn't say it today, but you maybe want to talk about it for a minute, uh, how the English and the French uh, danced with each other in administrating the islands.
Yes.
How the French would work, the French police would be working for 1 week, and then the next week would be the English or the British police, and then when the French come back again the week following, they just pick up where the French left off. They ignore what the British would do. So talk about that for a minute, because I think that's kind of like explains some of the nuttiness of what was going on there.
Yes, yes. Well, the other thing, of course, is that because I got so much stuff from him, um, it was possible to, in the case of Villa, in the English, in the Paris printings and the local printings, I was able to get an English stamp with a French cancellation, an English stamp with an English cancellation, a French stamp with a French cancellation, and a French stamp with an English cancellation, all of the 10 FNH value. And it made a nice little set of 8 with the combinations.
It's great.
Because that's one thing about the new Hebrides. People think that a lot of people think there were 2 post offices, an English post office and the French post office. or there was an English counter and the French counter. It was actually the whole thing was interchangeable. And in the earlier days, Santo tended to be a bit very much French orientated, and they'd sell French stamps wherever they could do and use French cancellations wherever they could do. But on the whole, when you went into the post office, you got what you were given, unless you specifically asked for something, and you get these nice combinations. And Bill Holland was very keen on these combination covers, and I think the fact that I've tried to copy that was down to an idea that I got from Bill.
His enthusiasm. Yeah.
Yes, as Bill is exhibited internationally in his collection. If you go back to 1972, when I was starting collecting, that was the first time I met Bill, and I lived in Manchester at the time, and about 12 o'clock midnight, Jim Crompton picked me up to go to an auction in London, a New Hebrides auction in London. And we arrived at Bill's house. I never met Bill before. We arrived at Bill's house for breakfast, and then went on to the auction in London.
Oh my God.
And quite a famous collection came up for sale that day. And that was when I first met him, and I got some of these ideas from him.
That's good. It's fun.
It's amazing what you can do. And again, when people get together like this and start talking about things, you sometimes get ideas from somebody else that you never thought about before.
I agree. I agree. I think this is all very interesting because it's not produced with us in mind. It's produced so people can use it, meaning us,
Hmm.
meaning collectors.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, yeah.
So, does anybody have any comments?
Richard, this is Jerry. I thought it was very interesting, and thank you for presenting it. I don't have any
Thank you.
specific comments because I don't know anything about New Hebrides.
Yeah. Well, it's quite an interesting area. It's the fact that there's four of you can get this combination of four of everything. I'm really grateful to Bill Holland because he just meant that I could just get a lot more variety. In fact, you get one stamp, you see one stamp, and you can get it four different ways when you get them used.
Yeah. Well, it was evident from your presentation, and that's the case. Yeah.
Yes, yes, yeah. I find it quite interesting. The big problem in New Hebrides is that if you are a British collector, you think, oh, New Hebrides, that's got a lot of French stamps. I won't bother collecting that. And the French apparently thought the same way. Well, half of it's British. We won't bother. So instead of it being collected by
Double
both the
interest.
British and the French in great quantity, a lot of them shun it because they think it's not a French colony, it's not a British colony. We're not going to collect it. When in actual fact, there's a tremendous amount of interest in it because of that.
I mean, there are people that collect mail that is um, when the rates are changing, or there are provisional rates or provisional currency. You know, where like there's that interim period where the gold francs were used and then not used and all that. That's a pretty specialized little area. I think
Yes,
it's
yes,
interesting to me.
yes. I get a lot of pleasure out. I think I get more pleasure in stamp collecting, and in postal history. I get more interest. I get more interest out of finding two or three of something and saying why, and and getting it. I'm trying to find an answer, and occasionally, not always, but occasionally managing to find that answer, and finding that it's something a little bit more interesting than you expect. And then that's where I get my fun out of it. The satisfaction out of collecting.
I think that clearly shows. I think it's fun, and I think that's great. I think
Mm,
it's fun to watch. It's fun to listen to that.
yes. Well, if any of you who are tuning in, if any of you are thinking of collecting this, particularly the free francs, if you look on Steve's website, you'll find quite a lot.
Oh yeah, I wasn't plugging
If you
that,
want to
but
get
yes,
started,
I do have a listing of it as well, where I've attempted many years ago. Howard Lee, who is is a dealer and collector, it's kind of like my uh, I looked up to him, my mentor, I guess. He said,
yes,
Stephen, you're getting all of this stuff. Before you disperse it, you should copy things that are different. So,
yes,
fast forward 30 years, what I've done is I know it must be 300 or 400 different caches of Vanuatu. Same with the
yes,
Solomons, same with Fiji,
yeah,
and Peter Rhoda and all this other stuff. And so,
yeah,
uh, I've done what I can to document all that. And
yes,
it's post-independence with Vanuatu. It's plenty of uh,
mm,
plenty of free frank material out there,
mm.
meaning
Uh,
lots of different caches.
Talking about Howard Lee, I did meet Howard in the 1970s because he was in London,
Hmm.
and I met him at a Pacific Islands meeting, and he reckoned he got something which he could supply me with, and I did have a couple of deals with him.
Oh, good. Yeah, yeah. See, I'm very fond of him. So,
Yes, I got on quite well with Howard, and I think we had a bit of correspondence afterwards as well.
okay. Anybody else have anything? Any comments?
Thanks again, Richard. Signing off.
Okay.
Well, hey, Richard, I asked a few comments, but I think um, I guess the only thing I just thought is I thought your story about how the French and the English police, the French and the British police, talk about that story for a moment, where you explained to me the other day.
Well, what happened in the New Hebrides was that although it was a joint administration, it was a separate administration. But when departments sh shared a particular job, they didn't necessarily work together. And the story I have heard, and I believe it is probably true, is that the they had the police department, but instead of having a French section police department working each week and the English section working each week, that they actually worked alternate weeks, which I find very extraordinary. But the story is that the French came in on the Monday and they worked for the whole week, and then they've transferred everything over to the British people at the end of the week, and the British people ran the police for the next week. But when the British people came in, they looked at what they'd done 2 weeks earlier and ignored what the French had done, and vice versa. And if you're going to run the country like that, it doesn't seem to be a very sensible way of doing it. But the two they had all sorts of trouble in the New Hebrides. Um, you see it through the stamps all the way through on the stamps. When the first stamps were issued, we put New Hebrides condominium on the stamps, which is what we should have done. The French accidentally put New Nouvelle Hebride on them. And we kicked up a fuss and said, you can't do that. It's not a French colony. You've got to put condominium on. It was they're very, very touchy and they didn't always work together and it always had to be tit for tat. And you get it through the postmarks. All sorts of things happened afterwards. You had the watermarks in 1911, where they issued an English set and the French set, but they accidentally, when the printers printed the French set, they printed them with an English watermark. So the French kicked up a fuss, and they had to reprint them with a French watermark.
Oh, funny.
And even even going back up to 1963. Harrison's printed four values four of the values for the definitive set, and they printed them with the English. If it was in the everything that was printed in English, any ciphers that were shown on the stamps had to be the other way around. It had to have the French first and the English second. Because it was English, it had to have the French first and the English second.
Oh,
And
funny.
when it was the French stamp, it had to have the French
Flipped.
stamp, English first and French second, French stamp, and vice versa. But when they printed them, they printed the French stamps with with the French cachet first and the English cachet second, and the British made them reprint them. So the whole thing went on through the whole from 1911 to 1977. You
Well,
get all this silly business of everything had to be exactly right to show that it wasn't the one country hadn't got preference over the other.
So what happened to the rejected stamps? Do they make it onto the market or they just get burned?
Oh no, they issued them. They issued those. And they were issued, and they were forced to reprint them. I think they reprinted them about 2 years later. I think the although I said it was 1963, I think the four values which came out about 1965,
Mhm.
and they had to reprint them again in 1967.
Interesting.
It's a
Very
little bit of
interesting.
fun, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah, it's interesting. It's nuttiness. It's great.
Yes, yes, yeah, yeah. I was it was good it was good fun, and there were others. There were other things like this. I did quite a study on the and it's completely out of the context of this display, but it always puzzled me why we were allowed to have a coronation stamp in 1953 in English version only and no French. Didn't make any sense. But going through the archives at Kew, I found out that in 1950, the French asked to issue, if they could issue French only, a stamp for the 10th anniversary of the Appel Historique by General de Gaulle in 1940. And we agreed to it. But eventually the French sent more correspondence saying we've decided not to issue the stamp after all. But a precedent was established. And because we had agreed to the being a French only stamp, when we asked to have an English only stamp, the French agreed to
Ah,
it, tip for tat,
oh,
you
that's a
see.
little backstory I didn't know.
And that's the story behind, and that is the story behind it. And I think I published that in Pacifica. I think if you look through Pacifica, you'll find the documents in Pacifica which show that. It was quite interesting because at the time I was researching something completely different,
That's
and I just
interesting.
came across these in the 1950 period,
Great.
and it told a very interesting story. So again, it goes to show you look for one thing in collecting, and you suddenly find something else.
And you have to keep your eyes open and
Yeah, that's right.
and not be
Sometimes sometimes when you think one door's firmly shut, another one opens.
the other way of looking at it is that when you're going down the road and there's a fork in the road, you take it.
Yes, yes. I've got one of those tomorrow, actually.
All right.
Okay, well, I'm going to say thank you.
Nobody else has
Okay,
any
it's been a pleasure.
comments? Well, thanks everybody. It's been a pleasure, Richard. And thank you so much for your time and energy for putting this together. It's appreciated. The
Thanks,
SAS
Steve.
is thrilled, and we'll put it on the website in a few weeks, a few days, probably by tomorrow, actually. And everybody will be able to view it at their leisure. Okay. Thank you,
Thanks very much,
everybody.
everyone. Okay, bye.
Take care.